We're going to require to see individuals as human beings versus not the medical model. There's nothing wrong with the medical model, but I think human beings are more than just a diagnosis, right? They're just more than the symptoms they're presenting. And providers know this. So I think I'm very optimistic about mental health. And I think it's something that we need to continue to talk about and see it as more mental wellness.
Welcome to the Beauty Talk podcast, where we feature how the best medical practitioners help their patients to look better, younger, and healthier. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Beauty Talk. We feature the top practitioners in health and beauty, both inside and out. I have Millie Maldonado, a licensed mental health counselor, qualified supervisor, trauma therapist, and co-founder of The Mind Gym, a Florida-based mental health practice focused on trauma-informed care, emotional wellness, and healing. With over a decade of clinical leadership experience, Millie has served as a therapist, clinical director, executive director, consultant, supervisor, and trainer, supporting both clients and mental health professionals in the field. She's trained in evidence-based trauma approaches, traumatic incident reduction, TIR, EMDR, and TF-CBT. Her work focuses on helping individuals move from survival mode into self-understanding, resilience, and emotional freedom, while also exploring healing as a holistic process that connects the mind, body, and nervous system. So Millie, welcome and glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here too. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start from the very beginning. What got you first interested in, let's say, the broad field, the medical field?
The medical field, yes. Well, I believe I started pretty much with my first career. I was in business management, and my job was to collect money from people. I was a supervisor of a publishing firm and reminding individuals that they needed invoices to pay for their advertising. And then came 9/11. And a lot of our clients were affected because they were in the cruise industry. And I was able to get to know the actual human being versus the business aspect of who I was working with. And that opened up just a vision of what I wanted to do in my life. And although it was a lucrative, wonderful career, I wanted to do more in my connection with human beings.
Okay. So what was it that specifically that made you decide to transition over into mental health then? Like,
right.
why this now?
Exactly. And it happened eventually because I got to see, like I said, I got to meet the human beings and got to listen to their stories. And I felt very comfortable and connected to those individuals. And side note, I was doing theater. I wanted to be an actress. And so my professor at the time, my theater teacher, had also a background in mental health, in psychology. And she brought a lot of psychology into the work of an actor. And so I figured this is pretty much what I want to do. I want to connect my love to human beings, my connection to their storytelling, and also help them with specific training. And then I fell in love with psychology.
Okay. And so that led you now to the Mind Gym, which is your own practice. What led you to decide to start your own business?
After 10 years of working within the nonprofit organizations and consulting to other firms, actually my business partner, Eric Silva, who we went to school together, decided that, let's do this as a practice and put together what we found that some agencies were lacking, which was the connection of mental health and also physical fitness. And seeing mental health not only as what happens through the individual's thought process and that leads to behavior, but also their connection with their bodies.
Okay. So now you have this practice. I want to talk about some of the treatments you provide. So you have the trauma-focused treatments, which is the EMDR and traumatic incident reduction. Could you explain what both of those mean? It seems like just a bunch of letters put together.
I know. So I'm fully trained in what it is. The traumatic incident reduction is a evidence-based model that provides exposure therapy and narrative therapy. So what it is allowing the client to revisit what happened to them in a safe environment as a therapeutic office without any judgment or interruption, and then having them repeat or talk to their therapist about what happened. So, sort of like reliving the story. And we do it through repetition so that the client can then, they're able to connect with what happened and talk about it and connect with the healing process, which means to realize that they're no longer in that space and narrate their story as they remember it. Um, EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it is another evidence-based practice. A lot of people have heard about it from the different celebrities that have talked about it, sort of like Miley Cyrus. And what it is also a therapeutic approach that allows the client to, with eye movement, which is the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, process the traumatic event. It's more of the brain doing the healing. There's the individual, unlike TIR, they don't have to talk about the whole story. They talk about whatever comes up after their processing based on some guidance from the therapist, and meet what we would call like an endpoint, connecting them with the negative belief that probably they created when the incidents happen or the events or the theme, and getting them to what they want to believe instead, which is the positive cognition.
Mm.
So, two great evidence based practices that do help the client not just talk about what happened, but pretty much experience it, connect the two parts of the brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus, so that they're able to really integrate the memory and heal from whatever they experienced.
Okay. Now, you also talk about how trauma lives in the nervous system. Could you explain kind of what that means?
All right. So, yeah, absolutely. So, when I talk about how trauma lives in the nervous system, I like to remind clients that what happens to them is not disconnected from their brain. We are a whole system, right? So, when we go through traumatic events, we go through experiencing the defense mechanism, right? So, fight, flight, freeze. And that happens in our brain, right? Our amygdala, which is part of our brain, sends signals to our body when we're in danger. And that pretty much creates us or gets us to defend or run or fight, whatever it is that we process and that we experience trauma. But when the experience ends, the body pretty much is still right, though, especially with trauma, that there it's not something that probably they got. For example, anything else that I got scared, right? But I know that I'm no longer in danger. It was just something, a scary movie. So then I'm able to understand that that was just a scary movie and that I'm safe. With trauma, what happens is that we don't get the final, right? That it is no longer there. It's I'm safe now. It gets stuck in our nervous system. So every time we're reminded of something that happened that's similar, our body or mind reacts again of it's going to happen again. So we go into the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and we go into thinking that obviously we're in the car accident or we are being the victims of an assault, when probably it was just a reminder. Maybe somebody spoke loud, or maybe there was a smell that reminded us of that traumatic event. So our whole nervous system goes into that defense mechanism.
Okay. So that's the nervous system. And in a related, but I guess separate, how does it also live in relationships?
Oh, well, that's a great question. So, I don't want to just say that it lives, that everybody that has gone through trauma is affected by their relationship, right? Because I think everybody's story is different, and how they are able to overcome it or how they deal with the trauma is specifically on them. But it can definitely affect our attachment to people. It can affect how we trust individuals. It can affect our ability to communicate, specifically of the what type of trauma they experience, how old was the person when they experienced trauma. So we hear a lot about children that have experienced trauma through adverse childhood experiences, and how then they pretty much grew up without being able to process the trauma, and that actually affects the way that they create relationships, from romantic relationships to employers, friends, even with parents.
Okay. And you talked about attachment. What is this concept of attachment wounds? Like, what is that?
Attachment wounds.
Wounds, yeah.
Okay, so and within attachment wounds, what I'm understanding is because there's different type of attachments, right? We have the attachment avoidance,
Mhm.
we have the attachment of fear. We have different attachments. So when there something happens with the attachment, what happens when we're young, a wound or like say a scar, right, and it hasn't healed, then that actually disrupts the attachment that we have with the individual, with our caregivers. And then it leads obviously also into adulthood. How we created from a very young age our attachments is pretty much how we are going to also communicate with with individuals around us and how we're going to present ourselves to the world.
Okay. Now, when people are going through trauma and just trying to get through it, they can get stuck, or I guess feel that they're stuck in just survival mode. What is that feeling like for people who are maybe going through that but just don't realize that that's what it is? And how do they get out of it?
Right. Well, I think the survival comes in different phases. We can talk about it as anxiety, right? A lot of us may say, I've been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, personality disorders. So it manifests in different ways of how the person also behaves. And so we look at it like, how do I respond in stressful situations? How do I respond in situations where I'm feeling uncomfortable? How I'm able to advocate for myself. Some individuals believe that's how they see it, how they're able, maybe at work, seeing that they cannot advocate, talk for themselves. They have problems communicating. So there's many ways that they can pretty much we would look at, right, when how somebody has been affected by trauma. We have many, within the DSM-5, there's so many diagnoses and that meet criteria for other diagnoses that may not be linked to what the individual went through. But when we look at it through the trauma lens, we can understand that a lot of these diagnoses are part or reasons of what the trauma, or what you call, like the trauma wounds or the attachment wounds of the individual.
Okay.
I don't
Got
know
it.
if that answered your
Yeah.
question.
No. It was helpful. Now, when it comes to, I guess, common misconceptions or common myths, what are some of these common misconceptions that you hear from your clients all the time, or maybe even myths that they believe?
Well, I think one of them is that it already happened and it should not be already impacting you, right? Get over it, right? I should be over this already is one of the myths. Another one is if it didn't happen to you. And so one of the things that we talk about is vicarious trauma,
Mm,
which we also see it with individuals in our field. And just because you did not experience something, that it does not mean that probably you were not affected by it. We look at it, I brought back the 9/11 situation, how that changed my, I guess, view of what I wanted to do in my life. So a lot of individuals that did not experience fully the 9/11, they were not direct victims. They were impacted by just watching on the news or on TV what happened, and were pretty much traumatized to the point that they were experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder because of vicarious trauma. So one of them is that is, well, if you didn't live it, why would you be traumatized for it? And we see it a lot in the helping field. And again, another other one is, again, it happened already. You continue, if you talk about it, you should be okay, right? Some people can tell you about their traumas and not really present as being affected, but maybe when they are triggered by an experience, they go back to feeling how they were feeling at the time. And then they're wondering, I thought that by talking about it, it was done. I was cured, right? I was able to process the what happened to me.
Okay. Now, I'm sure that you get some people coming in where they know they need some help, something is going on in their life, and they know they need treatment. I'm sure you get some other people as well who maybe think that, oh, well, I mean, my friend, my spouse, my whoever told me to come in for therapy, but I think I'm okay. So how does this, I guess, manifest, particularly for the people who don't really believe it's an issue, or it's just not really much of an issue. What's the most common ways that their trauma kind of manifests where you're like, oh no, like you have had trauma because of this, and this?
Right. Well, a lot of them can come in, for example, individuals that come in, they don't directly come and say in session, well, I've gone through trauma or I've had a horrible childhood or this happened to me and that's the reason why I'm here. They
Mm,
come because obviously how they've been affected, like their relationship. For example, you ask how trauma affects relationships. And so they come in thinking, well, it's not going well with my partner, or I'm on the verge of divorcing my spouse, and so I decided that I wanted to come to therapy because I've been told that I'm the problem. And so when we start talking about specifically the presenting problems, and we begin to ask about, well, tell me your story. Tell me about, you as a child, you prior to experiencing these situations. Then you begin to, they tell you their story and hear what happened to them, right? And this comes with psychoeducation. And this is something that I like to remind clients, that I like to look at mental health as mental wellness. And so the same way that we look, when we go to the doctor or we go to the dentist for our annual, we should be talking to somebody, right? A therapist, to get to know who we are, how we're coming up in the world. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the individual. I always just remind them, if there's something that's bothering you, or there's something that's not allowing you to feel as your best person or coming as your best you, let's look at it. Let's figure out if there's some, just situations that we want to look at it, some blind spots. And we'll see it, and see it from many aspects, from the present problem to, has there anything in the past that happened that has been similar, and what was the worst part about it. So just getting to know your story.
okay. Now, when it comes to the healing process, why is it important to connect both the mind and the body through this process?
Right. Yeah, like I mentioned before, right? We're not disconnected from our mind and our body. And so healing should be a full body situation, right? So when I talk to clients about, what has been going on with them, and we address obviously their past traumas, we also look at how they learn to take care of their body, how their body responds to stressful situations, when they're scared, when they're sad, and how do they take care of it. By, some people will say, well, I'm very anxious, I don't eat, or I go out on a drinking binge, or I go to bed and I don't want to do anything. So teaching them also that their body, moving their body, learning about what they're feeding themselves, their nutrition, can also help with their healing. So looking at it as a full vessel, not just the mind, right?
Yeah.
Understanding, yeah, and I always give them the example, um, when we are hungry, right? There's times where we cannot make good decisions because we're extremely hungry, and
Mm,
then we get hangry.
mm,
And so that's just even part. You will not say, I'm just angry, or I'm not, or I'm just hungry. You're going to say, I'm hangry, I'm upset because I'm hungry, right? So
mm.
your whole being. Same happens with mental health. And I think there has always been like this disconnect, or this stigma that there's something wrong with you if you're going to go see a therapist. I know that, for example, I'm Hispanic here in our culture. There's this saying that says, well, only crazies go to go to therapists, right? And
Mm.
it's always changing that conversation, that that's not true, that we go to a provider, specific providers, when we want to actually explore, right, if there's anything going on with us, or if we want to get better at something. And the same thing should be with mental health.
Okay. Now, when you talk about choosing a provider, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to choose a provider? They don't know, they've never been through this before, but they're looking for someone who has the experience, has the knowledge, and can help them get through whatever trauma they're going through. Like, what advice would you give to that person as they're doing their search?
Right. When they're doing their search, I would say that the first thing is that know that maybe the first therapist is not going to be the it therapist, because with therapy, it's creating a therapeutic relationship, and like any relationship, that we need to build that rapport. They need to feel safe. And obviously the qualifications of the therapist. What is the therapist focus? Well, when we look at mental health, we look at many aspects of mental health. Some therapists really focus in trauma. Others focus on helping clients with anxiety, depression, relationship. Others even for performance. And so, really talking to the therapist and interviewing the therapist, right? Figuring out if this therapist is a good fit for the individual. But I think it all starts with that rapport, and always going back and asking the questions, right? Like, how can you help me with this specific situation, or tell me a little bit about what your practice offers, and just starting that conversation. And again, I always say, that first therapist may not be it. You need to, or you should, instead of need, you should interview and get to know these providers.
Okay, good to know. Now, within your experience, Millie, I'm sure that you've worked on a lot of tough or challenging or even memorable cases and clients. Is maybe one story that comes to mind that you're able to share of just one of those memorable cases, and ultimately how you were able to get them a good result in the end?
Right. Oh my God, there's so many. But I think one that I will never forget, and I think it's because it was when I was first starting as a therapist, is I went in, I was working with this individual on a specific trauma that happened to their child. And the parent came more than anything, they wanted tools on how to help their child. And we were so focused on that. We were focused on this treatment plan, that it was to help them with parenting skills, with how to regulate their emotions when they were addressing what happened to their child. And it wasn't until I asked, well, why don't you tell me about what that was like if you were a child? Tell me, how would you have want an adult to address you? And that was then when they disclosed that they actually had been a victim of the same abuse.
Mm.
Did not come in their biopsychosocial that we do, which is a history taking with the clients, because the treatment was so focused on the parenting skills. And it wasn't until we then started talking about that need of that parent on processing their own trauma, we did not see the progress of her being able to be present for her child. Because every time they had to go to court or had to advocate for their child, they didn't realize that they were being blocked by their own triggers, by when they were a child and they experienced the same trauma. After that, not only was my client able to not only advocate for her child, but really also visit her home country where it happened, which she had not been able to do since a very young age, since she had to leave and come here.
Wow.
I'll never forget that. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
focused totally different. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Millie, where do you think the future of mental health is going?
I am very optimistic in the sense of um, the providers, what we're working on that it's no longer providing services based on diagnosis, right? It's seeing individuals for they are, human beings. And I know that there's been debate on AI and how AI has, individuals now go to AI to ask for, mental health advice. But
Mm.
I'm optimistic in the part that we're going to humanize more what mental health is, right? Where it's okay to go and ask. And if, they start with AI, which they're just going to give them something, a very good, probably answer, but not a human answer. And I think that's what makes a difference to going to see a therapist and a provider, is that you also get the unperfect human being, right? The therapist that is able to sit and hold space for you and really be interested in what has happened to you in your story. And so making those changes, and I think with our, new individuals, the young individuals, they are going to require that. They're going to require to see individuals as human beings versus not that the medical model, there's nothing wrong with the medical model, But I think human beings are more than just the diagnosis, right? They're just more than the symptoms they're presenting. And providers know this. So I think I'm very optimistic about mental health. And I think it's something that we need to continue to talk about and see it as more mental wellness, right? You don't feel bad to tell your friends that you go to the gym and that you're going to be seeking a trainer. So the same conversation should be about seeking mental health therapy, right? Looking at it as a wellness tool versus a crisis intervention.
Okay. Well, Millie, I do have one last question for you. But before I ask it, I do want to point people to your website at themind-gym.com.
Yes.
Now, last question for you, Millie. What does beauty mean to you?
Beauty means to me, and I don't want to say anything that's so cliche, like, oh, it's being you and whatever. I think beauty comes from pretty much uh, the individual itself within, right? The whole of the individual, the uniqueness of the individual. That to me is beauty and authenticity. If I can think of the most beautiful individuals, it's not how they look or the shape of their body, but how authentic they show up for others.
Very well said.
Mhm.
Okay, well, there you have it, Millie sharing her expertise. So, Millie, where can people contact you and your business?
All right. So definitely through our website or our direct number, 786-592-0057. They can contact there for appointments or just free consultations. We provide 15-minute free consultation. Like I was mentioning, it's just for them to interview their therapist, get to know if this will be a good fit. And also through Instagram, right? So we have Mind Gym Miami, the underscore Miami. And there we also are active in, through DMs, just responding to any questions that individuals may have.
Awesome. Well, Millie, this was great. Thank you for coming on and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to the Beauty Talk podcast. Any questions, please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.